Chet Faker's Gold. Make the camera dance to music. I don't know if that's working. I thought I'd try. This song's super chill. And of course, gold is going to be a major topic of the economics of ancient Egypt. It's Global 214. We're going to cover the Nile River Valley and ancient Egypt, get the economics, and then one side and the other side, we're going to cover the sociology, psychology, and politics all wrapped up into one nice little chart. Let's listen to a little Chet Faker. I love that slow vibe. I'm liking it. And so here we go. Let's get into this Nile River Valley and the economics of the Nile River Valley. That was Gold by Chet Faker. So obviously the first thing we're going to have to cover is, of course, the economics, the money, the goods, the services, what we had found in the other river valleys, Mesopotamia and the Indus River Valley. Those were really barter, trade-based economies, and this one's not going to be really any different. Okay, and so there was a lot of trade and barter system type stuff going on in ancient Egypt. You also had trade up and down the river through sailing. So you had trades occurring via boats, right, on the Nile River itself, because the Nile River is so long. But we're also going to see a little bit of a shift here, right? We're going to get a little bit of shift away from this barter system, and we're going to see a little bit of shift towards a financial system of money. All right, so we're going to have a little bit of a shift towards a finance system with money. So instead of a strict barter system, I want to give you 3 goats or 2 cows. That would be a barter system, like a direct trade of goods, 1 good for another good, or 5 goods for 1 good. Instead of a direct trade barter system like that, you're going to see a little bit of a shift towards a financial system. I will give you 2 goats for 5 pieces of gold. Gold. And in ancient Egypt, we're going to start to see gold coins, not just coins used to go get some procreation going at the temple, like in Mesopotamia, but in this case, actual gold coins that function more like a currency of money. I would give you 2 goats for 5 pieces of gold. Perfect. Okay. And so that's going to be a little bit of a change than what we're used to in these other river valley situations. Okay, we're actually using money in a traditional sense, like in the way that we use it today, where you exchange money for goods. Now, why gold? Let's just talk about this economically here for a minute. Right? Gold is perfect for currency, not just because it's shiny, but because it's rare. Right? Gold is very rare. There is a finite supply, meaning there is only so much of it. And we have covered, maybe back at the beginning of the year, we talked about how supply can determine price. If there's a high supply of something, it's basically worthless. But if the supply is low, then the price increases. And so gold, being a sort of a rare metal of finite supply, gold carries with it a pretty strong value or price, just based on the laws of supply and demand. Okay, and so that's an important realization. I'm going to come over here. Let's switch over to the old PowerPoint presentation. And we'll shift up. So I don't think this PowerPoint presentation is going to reveal anything that we didn't just talk about. It was a barter economy based on trade. You had a lot of sailing to different port cities or towns along the Nile. And we also had the introduction of gold as the first step towards a currency that carries a value like, we think of money or coins today. And we also discussed the scarcity of gold means that gold has a certain value. Here's the one aspect that we probably missed on our notes. It has to do with an economy revolving around food safety and food security again, right? Food really is what made you wealthy. If you owned food, you could control other people's behavior. And one of the ways that, of course, people became in control of the food supply was to have slaves to do work for you to increase your food supply and your wealth. And of course, the wealthier you were, the more gold tokens you could earn, the more slaves you could buy. And in this particular case, we're going to use this to launch into a bigger discussion, maybe when it comes to Judaism, this idea of Hebrew slaves. And certainly Hebrew slaves are going to be an important part, slavery in general, but Hebrews in particular are going to be a very important part of the discussion when it comes to the economics of ancient Egypt and the Nile River Valley. So when I come back to my notes, you're going to very clearly see that I have added to the board while I was talking this idea that Hebrew slaves were a big part of the economics of the Nile River Valley. Let's shift over to the sociology, psychology, and politics, which we're going to cover through one hierarchy drawing. And as long as I'm on the slides, let's just finish up here. We'll go to the slide first and then come back and build the notes. Here is the sociology and politics and psychology of these Egyptians in the Nile River Valley. I think I might even be able to draw on this map if I use my little drawing tool here. Let's get a little red like a teacher. Teachers love red. The first thing that we want to notice, of course, here's the reuse of the word hierarchy. Right? This is our social pyramid of ancient Egypt. And of course, we know how the social pyramid works now. The higher on the pyramid you are, the more wealth and power and political power you have, but there's not as many people. And lower on the pyramid means less wealth with very little political power, but yet you have tons of people. And we see this group down here, the slaves were at the bottom, and the guy at the top was the king, just like in our previous drawings of a social hierarchy. And in Egypt, the king had a very special name. The king was the pharaoh. And pharaohs were considered to be gods, right? The whole idea was that when the pharaoh passed away and died, the pharaoh would enter the spirit world and become a god. And that wouldn't happen to, most normal humans. So we've got a little bit of a political note that we need to make there, right? And the note that we're going to make in our notebooks here in a second is that a political scientist is going to find this social hierarchy very interesting because the pharaoh is a god. The idea that will become policy, therefore a political scientist would be interested in it, the idea that will become policy is that there is no separation between church and state. There's no separation between church and state. So let's just shift over to, I'm going to come back to my notes. If I can figure out how to get there, and let's get some notes on the board that reflect this idea. So we're going to start with just a basic recreation of the social hierarchy. I have to admit, kids, the word pharaoh is one that I always struggle to spell because there's a famous racehorse. You know I love horse racing. Famous racehorse that won the Triple Crown, American Pharaoh. Don't know if you remember that horse or not. But they spelled pharaoh wrong in American Pharaoh. And being a horse race guy, I've always sort of, fallen into the trap of spelling that word wrong. So I apologize. I do probably have to cheat a little bit. I think it's A-O-H, but I don't know. Let me see. So up at the top is the pharaoh, A-O-H. And I'm going to check the spelling on that. I don't know. All right, but I'm going to check it. And then we have royals and priests underneath the pharaoh. And underneath the royals and the priests came certain levels of merchants and artisans. Oh, I forgot a very, very important position. I'm sorry. Here we have the soldiers, and then the merchants and artisans. And then you have your farmers, which we'll label as peasants, paisanos, as the Italians say, and of course the slaves at the bottom. And so we see food security being very, very important. Again, the mass numbers of people performing food security, creating food security for those above them on the pyramid. Psychologically, we've gone over this before. What ends up happening? Well, in ancient Egypt, because the soldiers were placed so high, this is a very intimidating social structure, right? Because the soldiers were basically the right-hand men of the pharaoh and the royals and the priests, and we saw those gold daggers in an earlier presentation, you really start to see psychologically, right? Psychologically, there's a lot of fear here, right? There's a lot of fear and intimidation in this ancient Egyptian society. It was commonplace. The bottom of the pyramid had a whole lot to be nervous about because the pharaoh and the royals and the priests were not afraid to use this class of citizens who were given sort of based, normally you'd think more education, but they were basically like hired mercenary type soldiers where they were going to do, because they were so valued on the social pyramid, they were going to do whatever the pharaoh and the royals asked. And so these people down here, they lived at quite a bit of fear and intimidation because the soldiers were sort of abnormally placed at a higher social level than usual. Okay, and there's an enduring issue there, right? I think we see in any society where the leaders, the political leaders, control the military, and there isn't a lot of separation between what the military is willing to do for that leader, that always results in bad things, right? Always results in bad things. Sometimes we see them around the world, we'll refer to them as like a military coup, where like a military general will actually take over as the leader and control the military as his own personal army. Never good. I've said it a million times. You wake up in America one day in the future and there's a political party with an army. If a political party develops an army, you got a big problem. Okay? And that should be a scary moment. And you got to be careful of that in your lifetime and in the ideas that you're supporting during your lifetime. You got to have separation between the soldiers and what they're willing to do for the political leadership, right? You got to have some separation there. And politically, right, the politics is, of course, there's no separation between the church, right, the priests and the gods, and the state, meaning the royals and the soldiers. They were lockstep with one another, right? Because the pharaoh was a god, nothing the pharaoh could say was wrong, and the soldiers were expected to do everything the pharaoh said. They had no objective thinking, well, that's not right, that's not ethical, that's not moral. Didn't matter. No separation between church and state. We know that here in the United States, we find ourselves adhering to some separation between church and state. That was the bell. Interestingly enough today, that's actually your bell also. We're out of here. The unit's over. And we're going to progress to our next unit after we do a CRQ and an essay. I'll see you later, guys.